Tonight, our journey takes us back to the ancient world, to the shadow of Vesuvius, to experience the last day of Pompeii. But first, come in from the cold. Close the heavy oak door behind you. You are safe here in the Library of Whispers. The candles flicker softly, and the fire in the hearth is dying down, casting golden shadows across the shelves. The book for this tale is already waiting, bound in sun-warmed, dusty leather. Let us open it now. Breathe in and let go. Our story begins. The world exists in a state of soft blue hesitation, a moment where the night has not yet gathered its heavy velvet skirts to depart, and the sun has yet to offer its first golden promise. Here, at the very edge of the Bay of Naples, the air is a living thing, a cool and damp presence that clings to the skin like a shroud of invisible silk. If you were to stand upon the shoreline now, you would feel the morning chill pressing gently against your cheeks, a reminder of the deep, dark hours that have only just begun to fade. It is a cold that does not bite but rather cradles, a lingering frostiness that settles into the pores and invites a slow, deep breath of the salt-thickened air. The bay itself is a mirror of hammered silver, reflecting the pale, bruised colours of a sky that is slowly waking from its slumber. There is a stillness here that feels ancient, a silence so profound that you can almost hear the heartbeat of the earth beneath the sand. The water does not crash against the coast. It merely sighs, a rhythmic and hypnotic lapping that speaks of 1,000 years of tides. Each tiny wave carries with it the scent of the deep, a rich and briny aroma of wet kelp, crushed shells, and the sharp, clean sting of salt that lingers on the tongue. It is the smell of the beginning of the world, a fragrance that has remained unchanged since the first ships found harbour in these gentle curves of the land. As the first sliver of light begins to bleed across the horizon, the darkness starts to dissolve into a hazy, translucent grey. The silhouettes of the world emerge from the gloom, softened by a lingering mist that dances upon the surface of the sea. You can see the masts of the fishing boats now, swaying ever so slightly in the morning's breath, their wooden skeletons groaning with a sound that is both lonely and comforting. It is the sound of seasoned timber, of oak and pine that have spent a lifetime soaked in the sea, protesting the weight of the ropes that bind them to the shore. Listen closely to the awakening of the port. It begins not with a shout, but with the quiet, rhythmic thud of a single oar hitting the water. It is a muffled sound, dampened by the thick air, a steady heartbeat that signals the start of the day's labours. Then comes the slide of wood against wood, the friction of the oars in their locks, creating a low and melodic creak that echoes across the mirror-flat water. You can hear the heavy, wet slap of ropes being coiled onto wooden decks a sound that carries the weight of manual toil and the rough texture of hemp. Each strand of those ropes is caked with salt and grime, and as they are pulled taut, they sing a strained, high-pitched note of tension before settling back into a slack and weary silence. The men who move through the shadows of the harbour speak in hushed tones, their voices nothing more than low murmurs that blend into the sound of the sea. There is no need for loud words in this hour of transition. They move with the grace of ghosts, their sandals scuffing softly against the damp stones of the quay, a dry and grainy sound that speaks of volcanic grit and centuries of footsteps. You can smell the faint, bitter scent of the small oil lamps they carry, a sharp contrast to the freshness of the sea air, a flicker of human presence in the vastness of the dawning world. It is a smell of olive oil and burnt wicks, a humble and earthy fragrance that grounds the ethereal beauty of the bay in the reality of daily life. Above it all, standing in silent and eternal vigil, is the mountain. In this early light, Mount Vesuvius is not a threat, but a guardian. Its slopes are a deep and vibrant green, a lush carpet of vineyards and forests that seem to glow with a soft inner radiance as the light touches them. The mountain casts a long and cooling shadow over the land, a protective mantle that keeps the heat of the morning at bay for just a little longer. It is a titan of stone and soil, its twin peaks reaching up to brush the underside of the clouds, a monument to the enduring power of the earth. You can feel the weight of the mountain's presence, a gravity that anchors the entire bay. It is a calm and steady thing, a silent witness to the passage of time. The air around its base is different from the air by the water. It is thinner, cooler, and carries the scent of pine needles and damp earth. If you were to climb those lower slopes now, you would feel the softness of the volcanic soil beneath your feet, a rich and fertile ground that has nourished the city for generations. You would hear the rustle of the leaves in the morning breeze, a dry and papery sound that whispers of the seasons turning and the sun rising once more. The light is stronger now, turning the grey mist into a veil of shimmering pearl. The colours of the bay are beginning to deepen, the silver water transforming into a pale, translucent turquoise. You can see the individual stones of the harbour wall, each one carved from the dark, porous rock of previous eruptions, their surfaces rough and cold to the touch. They are ancient stones, worn smooth in places by the friction of 1,000 mooring lines, their cracks filled with tiny, resilient plants that thrive in the salty air. If you were to run your hand over them, you would feel the history of the port, the coldness of the earth, and the memory of the fire that created them. The bay is alive now, though it still moves with a dreamlike slowness. The gulls have begun their morning patrol, their cries sharp and piercing in the quiet air, a sound that seems to cut through the lingering fog. They circle above the fishing boats, their white wings catching the first direct rays of the sun, turning them into flashes of brilliant light against the blue-grey sky. You can hear the fluttering of their feathers, a soft and rhythmic beating that adds another layer to the symphony of the awakening port. The smell of the sea is changing as the sun climbs higher. The sharp saltiness is being joined by the scent of wood smoke from the first hearths of the city, a warm and domestic aroma that drifts down to the water's edge. It is a comforting smell, a sign of life beginning to stir within the stone walls of Pompeii. It speaks of warm bread and morning fires, of families waking in the shadow of the mountain, unaware of the heat that the day will eventually bring. The mountain remains a constant, a green and silent giant watching over it all. Its peak is now bathed in a soft, rose-coloured light, a crown of morning glory that makes the stone look almost soft, almost welcoming. There is no hint of the fire within, no tremor in the earth to suggest that this guardian is anything other than a peaceful part of the landscape. It is a mountain of dreams and harvests, a source of life and beauty that defines the horizon. As you stand here, caught between the sea and the stone, the morning chill finally begins to lift. The first touch of warmth settles upon your shoulders, a gentle weight that promises a day of golden light and slow, languid hours. The bay is fully awake now, a vibrant and bustling world of ropes and oars, of salt and stone, all existing in the long and peaceful shadow of the great mountain. The transition is complete. The night has been forgotten, and the city of Pompeii begins its day in a state of quiet, hypnotic grace, wrapped in the whispers of the water and the eternal silence of their peaks. The transition from the sea to the city is a journey through textures, a passage from the yielding sands to the unyielding strength of basalt and limestone. As you walk through the marine gate, leaving the salt air behind, the sounds of the harbour begin to fade, replaced by the awakening echoes of the stone streets. The city of Pompeii does not wake with a sudden jolt, but with a slow and rhythmic opening of its eyes. It is a symphony of small domestic sounds that rise like wood smoke into the brightening sky. Imagine the sound of the first shop doors being unbarred. It is a heavy, resonant sound, the sliding of thick wooden beams across stone grooves. You can hear the grain of the wood protesting, a low and guttural groan that vibrates through the very foundations of the buildings. Then comes the rattle of the folding shutters, the tabernae doors being pushed back to reveal the dark, cavernous interiors where the day's trade will soon begin. It is a dry, clattering sound like the scales of a great serpent shifting, a sound that signals the city is ready to receive the world. As you move deeper into the narrow streets, the air begins to change. The cool, damp breath of the sea is replaced by the warmth of baking bread, a scent so thick and golden it feels as though you could reach out and touch it. It emanates from the pistrina, the bakeries, where the great stone mills have been turning since the middle of the night. If you were to stand outside one of these doorways, you would smell the slightly sour tang of fermenting dough, followed by the deep, toasted aroma of flour meeting the heat of the oven. It is a smell that carries the weight of comfort and survival, a fragrance that has nourished these families for hundreds of years. The streets themselves are still cool in these early hours, the deep shadows of the tall houses protecting the paving stones from the sun's reach. You can feel the smoothness of the volcanic basalt beneath your sandals, stones that have been polished by the passage of countless carts and feet. In the ruts carved by the wheels of heavy wagons, a little of the night's dew still lingers, a dark and glistening moisture that reflects the pale blue of the sky above. If you were to touch the walls of the houses, the opus incertum would feel rough and gritty, a mosaic of irregular stones held together by a mortar that smells faintly of lime and ancient dust. Listen to the water. This is the true heartbeat of the city. High above, near the Vesuvius gate, the Castellum Aquae has been silently distributing the bounty of the mountains through a network of lead pipes buried deep beneath your feet. You can hear the arrival of the water before you see it. It begins as a distant, hollow gurgle, a secret language spoken in the darkness of the earth. Then, as you approach one of the many public fountains that stand at the street corners, the sound transforms into a melodic and constant splashing. The fountain is a block of solid lava stone, carved with the face of a god or a theatre mask, and the water spills from its mouth in a clear silver arc. It hits the basin below with a sound that is both bright and heavy, a liquid percussion that fills the street with a sense of abundance. This is the sound of the aqueduct, the voice of the distant mountains brought into the heart of the stone city. As the townspeople begin to arrive with their jars and buckets, the sound changes again. You hear the hollow thunk of terracotta hitting the stone rim, the frantic bubbling as the air is displaced by the cool rushing water and the heavy wet slop of a full vessel being lifted and carried away. Reach out and dip your hand into the fountain's basin. The water is shockingly cold, a sharp contrast to the growing warmth of the morning air. It feels thin and energetic against your skin, a crystalline lifeblood that has travelled miles through the dark stone channels to reach this moment. The stone of the fountain itself is slick with a fine layer of moss in the corners, a soft and velvety texture that feels like a secret garden hidden in the architecture of the street. The smell here is clean and mineral, a scent of wet stone and mountain rain that cuts through the heavier aromas of the city. The shutters of the upper floors are being pushed open now, the wooden frames creaking on their hinges. From these high windows you can hear the muffled sounds of households stirring, the rustle of linen tunics being donned, the soft padding of bare feet on mosaic floors. These sounds are intimate and small, yet they weave together to form the fabric of the city's life. You might hear the distant ring of a metal pot, the low murmur of a mother waking her child, or the dry, scratching sound of a broom sweeping the threshold of a villa. The light is beginning to spill over the rooftops, turning the dull grey of the stone into a warm, glowing ochre. The frescoes on the exterior walls of the buildings start to reveal their colours, deep Pompeian red, earthy yellows, and the dark charcoal blacks that serve as the backdrop for painted gods and garden scenes. These paintings feel alive in the soft morning light, the pigments still holding the moisture of the air, their surfaces smooth and slightly cool to the touch. If you were to breathe in deeply, you might catch the faint metallic scent of the minerals used to create these colors, a smell of the earth transformed into art. The city is filling up, not with noise, but with movement. The slaves are out in force, their movements purposeful and quiet, their presence a silent undercurrent to the morning's grace. You can hear the soft rhythmic clack of their wooden clogs on the stones, a sound that is distinct from the lighter scuff of leather sandals. They carry baskets of vegetables, the green leaves of leeks and cabbages still beaded with water, adding a crisp and peppery scent to the air. At the thresholds of the great houses, the salutatio is beginning. The morning greeting of clients to their patrons creates a low, rolling hum of conversation that spills out into the street. It is a sound of many voices, a tapestry of Latin whispers and Greek murmurs, all softened by the thick stone walls and the heavy fabric of their togas. The smell here is more sophisticated, a hint of expensive perfume, the sweetness of honeyed wine, and the dry, papery scent of parchment being unrolled. The shadow of the mountain still stretches across the city, but it is shortening now, retreating toward the slopes as the sun climbs higher. The air is losing its sharp edge, becoming mellow and still. The city of Pompeii, this masterpiece of stone and water, is fully awake, its inhabitants moving through their morning rituals with a timeless and hypnotic rhythm. You are walking through a living machine of commerce and community, where every stone has a story and every drop of water carries the memory of the heights. The day has truly begun, and the stone city hums with the quiet, vibrant energy of 1,000 lives intertwined. As the morning matures, the narrow, shadowed capillaries of the side streets bleed into the vast, open heart of the city, the Forum. Stepping into this great rectangular expanse is like emerging from a dense forest into a sun-drenched clearing. Here, the scale of the world shifts. The intimate whispers of domestic life are swallowed by a grander, more public vibration, a low and steady hubbub that rises from the stones like heat from a summer road. It is the sound of 1,000 purposes converging, a rhythmic drone of human existence that hums with the vitality of the empire. Look up at the architecture that frames this sanctuary of commerce and law. The colonnades stretch out in long, elegant lines, a forest of white marble and grey tufa that provides a necessary sanctuary of shade. If you were to walk beneath these porticos, the air would immediately drop several degrees, the cool stone columns acting as anchors of stillness in the growing warmth. Reach out and press your palm against the fluted surface of a pillar. The stone is smooth, almost like skin, yet it possesses a cold, ancient density that vibrates slightly with the distant footsteps of the crowds. You can feel the fine, powdery residue of marble dust and the faint grit of volcanic ash that has settled into the grooves over the centuries. The light here is different. It is reflected and amplified by the pale surfaces of the temples and the law courts. It catches the gilded letters of the inscriptions and the polished bronze of the statues, creating a brilliance that makes you squint. The air carries a unique scent, a complex layering of the public and the sacred. There is the sharp, resinous tang of incense drifting from the temple of Jupiter, a sweet and heavy smoke that curls round the great columns before dissolving into the blue sky. It mingles with the smell of the earth, the dry mineral scent of sun-warmed stone, and the slightly metallic aroma of the bronze ornaments. Listen to the hubbub. It is not a chaotic noise, but a structured tapestry of sound. In the distance you can hear the rhythmic thump-thump of the money changers' wooden tables being set up, a sound that carries the promise of wealth and the weight of debt. There is the dry, papery rustle of expensive fabrics as the wealthy move through the crowd, their fine wool and silk togas whispering against their limbs. It is a luxurious, soft sound, a mark of status that contrasts with the rougher, scratchy texture of the tunics worn by the labourers. The merchants are the conductors of this urban orchestra. From the Macellum, the great meat and fish market, comes a different set of sensory signals. You can smell the brine of the fish stalls, a sharp and salty fragrance that reminds you of the bay you left at dawn. It is joined by the earthy, peppery scent of exotic spices, saffron, cumin, and black pepper, brought from the furthest reaches of the known world and sold in tiny, precious mounds. The voices of the traders are low and melodic, a constant stream of persuasion and negotiation. They speak in the hushed, confidential tones of men who know the value of a secret, their words falling like soft rain upon the ears of the curious. If you lean against one of the lower balustrades, you can feel the vibration of the city's commerce. The Mensa Ponderaria, the official weighing station, is nearby, and you can hear the dull clack of lead weights hitting the stone scales. It is a sound of precision and order, a reminder that in this city, everything has its measure and its price. Below the main level of the forum, in the shadowed spaces of the crypto porticus, the air is even cooler, smelling of damp earth and old wine. Here, the conversations are even quieter, the whispers of politicians and the plotting of rivals blending into the steady drip of water from a hidden cistern. The light continues to crawl across the open pavement, the shadows of the columns shortening until they are mere puddles of darkness at the base of each pillar. The heat is beginning to press down from above, a heavy, golden weight that slows the movements of the crowd. People begin to linger longer in the shade of the basilicas, their voices dropping in volume as the midday stillness approaches. You can hear the dry, rhythmic scratching of a scribe's stylus on a wax tablet, a tiny insect-like sound that persists even when the louder noises of the market begin to fade. It is the sound of history being recorded in real time, one tiny scratch at a time. Observe the quiet interactions that define the forum's rhythm. A group of elders stands near the temple of Apollo, their heads bowed in a silent, shared meditation. The only sound from them is the occasional soft sigh or the dry rustle of a hand moving across a bearded chin. Nearby, a young slave waits patiently by a fountain, the rhythmic plink-plonk of the water droplets hitting his bronze pitcher, creating a tiny hypnotic melody. These moments of stillness are the pauses in the city's breath, the quiet beats in the heart of the machine. The smell of the forum changes as the sun reaches its zenith. The sharp incense and fresh spices are being overtaken by the scent of the city's stone, a warm, dusty aroma that feels like the breath of the earth itself. It is a dry and ancient smell, the fragrance of endurance. You might catch the faint, sweet scent of a woman's perfume as she passes, a fleeting ghost of rose or jasmine that lingers for a heartbeat before being reclaimed by the sun. Everywhere you look, there is a sense of timelessness. The white marble of the statues depicting emperors and heroes long dead looks as though it has always been part of the sky. The stones of the pavement, worn into gentle hollows by the weight of millions of steps, feel like a riverbed that has seen the passage of an eternity. The Forum is not just a place, it is a pulse, a slow and steady vibration that connects the individual to the empire, the mortal to the eternal. As the morning draws to a close, the hubbub of the main square reaches a gentle crescendo before the inevitable retreat into the midday shade. The rhythms of the Forum are the rhythms of life itself, grand, purposeful, and deeply, beautifully human. You are standing at the center of the world, wrapped in the cool embrace of the columns and the golden heat of the sun, listening to the whispers of a city that believes it will live forever. The shadows are at their shortest, the air is at its heaviest, and the heart of Pompeii beats with a slow, magnificent confidence. The sun has reached its throne at the highest point of the heavens, a blinding and absolute sovereign that has transformed the city of Pompeii into a landscape of white light and ink-black shadows. It is the hour of the zenith, a time when the world seems to hold its breath under the weight of a golden, heavy silence. The air in the streets has become viscous, a shimmering haze that rises from the paving stones, carrying with it the dry, parched scent of sun-baked tufa and the fine, invisible dust of a city at rest. If you were to walk through the narrow alleys now, you would find them strangely deserted, the vibrant energy of the morning having retreated behind the thick, cooling walls of the houses. The city is not sleeping, but rather waiting, suspended in a state of languid, heat-soaked meditation. You can feel the sun pressing against the back of your neck, a physical weight that demands a slower pace. The heat is not a sharp thing, but a broad and encompassing pressure that settles into your marrow, making every movement feel as though you are pushing through a sea of warm honey. The sounds of commerce have faded into a distant, muffled memory, replaced by the rhythmic, dry chirping of cicadas in the hidden gardens, a sound that seems to vibrate within the very air itself. It is a time for the shadows, for the seeking of stone that has not yet been touched by the direct fire of the sky. We move now toward the grand entrance of the Stabian Baths, a sanctuary of moisture and cool masonry that promises a reprieve from the relentless light. As you approach the heavy arched doorway, the air begins to shift. The dry, dusty breath of the street is replaced by a hint of something damp and mineral, a premonition of water and shadow. Stepping over the threshold is like diving beneath the surface of a still pond. The brilliance of the forum is extinguished, replaced by a soft, filtered gloom that smells of wet lime, old stone, and the faint, sweet aroma of wood smoke from the hidden furnaces. The change in acoustics is immediate and profound. The sharp, dry echoes of the street, where sound bounces off hard surfaces like a pebble on ice, are gone. In their place is a hollow, liquid resonance that seems to hang in the air. Every footfall on the mosaic floors produces a soft, rounded thud that lingers, a sound that is both intimate and expansive. You can hear the distant melodic dripping of water from a hidden pipe, a rhythmic plink-plink that echoes through the vaulted ceilings, creating a sense of being inside a vast stone instrument. It is the sound of a secret world, a place where time is measured not by the sun, but by the steady flow of the aqueduct. In the apoditerium, the changing room, the air is cool and smells faintly of leather and clean linen. The walls are adorned with intricate stucco work, shadows playing across the raised figures of gods and athletes, making them seem to move in the corner of your eye. You sit upon a stone bench that is cold to the touch, a shocking and welcome sensation against your heat-flushed skin. The texture of the stone is smooth and slightly grainy, its surface worn by the passage of thousands of bodies seeking this same comfort. Here, the voices of the bathers are nothing more than low, melodic murmurs, their words softened by the thick plaster and the high, domed ceilings until they are indistinguishable from the sighs of the wind. As we move deeper into the complex, we enter the tepidarium, the warm room. Here, the temperature begins its gradual climb, a gentle and persuasive heat that coaxes the tension from your muscles. The air is thicker now, carrying the rich, intoxicating scents of the unctorium. You can smell the golden, viscous olive oil being poured from glass vials, infused with the essence of crushed rose petals, bitter almonds, and the deep, resinous scent of cedarwood. It is a heavy floral fragrance that clings to the damp walls and settles into your skin, a perfume of luxury and restoration. Imagine the sensation of the strigil, the curved metal scraper, moving across your arm. It is a rhythmic and satisfying sound, a dry hiss, followed by the soft, wet sliding of oil and water being gathered from the skin. The touch is firm and methodical, a ritual of cleansing that feels as ancient as the stones themselves. Around you, the light is dim, provided by small high windows that cast long slanted beams of dust-moted gold through the humid air. In these beams you can see the steam beginning to rise, a ghostly dance of moisture that blurs the edges of the world. Now we approach the heavy bronze doors of the caldarium, the hot room. As they swing open, a wall of thick white steam rolls out to meet you, wrapping its warm arms around your body in a suffocating, beautiful embrace. Stepping inside is an immersion into a world of pure sensation. The heat here is absolute, radiating from the very floor beneath your feet, where the fires of the hypercaust roar in their brick tunnels far below. You can feel the warmth rising through the thick square tiles, a steady and pulsing heat that vibrates in the soles of your feet and climbs up through your legs until your entire being is glowing. The acoustics in the caldarium are even more ethereal. The thick steam acts as a veil, dampening some sounds while amplifying others. The voice of a companion sounds as though it is coming from another world, a soft and distant echo that has lost its sharp edges. But the sound of the water is vivid and clear. In the center of the room stands the labrum, the great circular basin of white marble, and the water spilling from its central jet creates a constant rushing sound like a mountain stream. Each droplet that hits the surface of the heated water below creates a tiny, crystalline note, a delicate percussion that cuts through the heavy, humid silence. Find a place to sit upon the marble tiers, feeling the heat of the stone penetrate through your thin wrap. The steam is so thick that you can no longer see the far wall, only the soft glow of the oil lamps that hang from the ceiling like distant amber stars. As you breathe in, the air is heavy and moist, tasting of minerals and the deep, earthy warmth of the furnaces. It is a sensory saturation, a moment where the boundaries of the self seem to dissolve into the warmth and the mist. The sweat breaks upon your brow, not with the frantic heat of the sun, but with the slow and cleansing release of the bath. We leave the heavy, moisture-laden atmosphere of the baths behind, stepping back out into the world of stone and light for a fleeting moment. But we do not return to the broad, busy thoroughfares of the morning. Instead, we seek a doorway that promises a different kind of silence, a sanctuary carved out from the very heart of the city's commerce. We stand before the threshold of a great domus, the private residence of a merchant whose wealth has been built upon the very trade we witnessed in the Forum. As the heavy oak doors are pulled shut behind us, the roar of the street is extinguished as if a candle has been snuffed. The transition is marked by the fauces, the narrow throat of the house, where the air is immediately cooler and smells of the polished basalt floor and the lingering sweet smoke of the morning's offerings at the lararium, the family altar. Moving through the atrium, where the sky peers down through the rectangular opening of the impluvium, we find ourselves drawn toward the back of the house, toward the source of a soft and rhythmic whispering. This is the Peristyle, the heart of the home, a rectangular garden enclosed by a colonnade of elegant painted pillars. Stepping into this space is like entering a living emerald, a sanctuary of greenery and stone where the sun is filtered and the wind is hushed into a mere sigh. The heat of the midday, which remains a fierce and blinding presence in the streets outside, is here transformed into a gentle golden glow that rests upon the waxy leaves of the boxwood hedges and the delicate pink petals of the oleander. The air in this garden is a masterpiece of fragrance, a layered and complex perfume that settles into the lungs with a soothing weight. It is dominated by the sharp, resinous scent of rosemary and the sweet herbal warmth of lavender, plants that have spent the morning drinking in the sun. If you were to walk along the narrow dirt paths that weave between the flower beds, your footsteps would release the scent of crushed thyme, a fragrance that is both earthy and invigorating. There is the faint, peppery aroma of the ivy that climbs the fluted columns, its dark leaves catching the light like shards of green glass. Above it all drifts the scent of the earth itself, a rich and fertile aroma of damp soil and ancient mulch that speaks of growth and a quiet domestic endurance. Look closely at the walls that surround this private paradise. They are not merely boundaries of stone and plaster, but windows into an eternal forest. The frescoes are vibrant and deep, painted with such skill that the eye is momentarily deceived into believing the garden extends for miles beyond the confines of the house. You can see thickets of dark green laurel, branches heavy with ripe purple figs, and tiny delicate birds that seem to have been frozen in mid-song. The pigments are rich and saturated, the deep velvet red of the roses, the brilliant ochre of the sun-dappled paths, and the cooling translucent blues of a painted sky that never knows a cloud. If you were to run your fingers over these walls, you would feel the slight grainy texture of the plaster and the coolness of the pigments, smoothed over by a thin coating of wax that protects these images from the passage of time. These paintings do not just depict nature, they capture its very soul, creating a space where it is always spring, where the leaves never fall and the shadows are always long and kind. In the center of the garden stands a small fountain, a masterpiece of marble and bronze that acts as the rhythmic heart of the Peristyle. It is not the grand, rushing feature of a public square, but an intimate and delicate thing. A single, slender jet of water rises into the air, catching the light like a string of liquid diamonds, before falling back into a shallow, circular basin of white marble. The sound is hypnotic, a constant bubbling murmur that fills the space with a sense of fluid movement. Each drop that hits the surface of the pool creates a tiny, rhythmic plink, a crystalline note that echoes softly against the stone floor of the colonnade. You can hear the water sliding over the mossy rim of the basin, a soft and wet sound that is the very definition of peace. Find a place to rest in the deep shade of the colonnade, perhaps upon a low wooden couch draped in soft, unspun wool that still carries the faint lanolin scent of the countryside. The shadow of the roof is a cool and welcoming embrace, a sharp contrast to the brilliant white light that illuminates the center of the greenery. The stone of the pillars is smooth and cold against your skin, and if you lean your head back against one, you can feel its ancient, unyielding strength. From this vantage point, the world slows down until every second is a long and languid breath. You can watch the dust motes dancing in the slanted beams of sunlight, their movements erratic and graceful, like tiny golden spirits caught in a beam of amber. The sounds of the city are entirely absent here, replaced by the delicate music of the garden. Listen to the dry, papery rustle of the palm fronds as they sway in the slight breeze that has found its way over the high rooftops. It is a sound of parched scales and distant shores. You can hear the low, industrious hum of a bumblebee as it moves heavily from flower to flower, its vibration a steady and comforting drone that harmonizes with the splashing of the fountain. Occasionally, there is the soft, dry scritch of a small lizard moving across the warm stones of the path, a sound so small it would be lost in any other environment. But here, it is as clear as a footstep upon the pavement. The state of otium, the dignified leisure that is the prize of the Roman world, settles over you like a heavy velvet blanket. Your eyelids become weighted with a pleasant drowsiness, a byproduct of the heat, the fragrance, and the rhythmic sound of the water. This is not a heavy sleep, but a drifting, a state of half-consciousness where the boundaries between the self and the garden begin to blur. You are aware of the texture of the wool beneath your hands, the coolness of the shade on your brow, and the warmth of the sun on your feet. It is a moment of absolute equilibrium, a suspension of time in the heart of a city that believes itself to be eternal. As you drift on the edge of sleep, the frescoes seem to come alive in the periphery of your vision. The painted birds appear to twitch their wings, and the leaves of the painted trees seem to tremble in an imaginary wind. The garden is a stage, and you are the solitary audience wrapped in a silence so profound that you can hear the very pulse of the afternoon. The scent of the rosemary becomes more intense as the air grows stiller, a sharp and clean fragrance that clears the mind, even as the body relaxes into the cushions. You can feel the moisture from the fountain in the air, a fine and invisible mist that settles upon your skin, cooling it as it evaporates in the gentle draught of the colonnade. The pillars cast long, regular shadows across the mosaic floor, creating a rhythmic pattern of light and dark that leads the eye toward the center of the greenery. The mosaics themselves are intricate and small, depicting scenes of marine life and geometric patterns, their colors softened by the constant shade. If you were to look closely, you would see the individual tesserae, the tiny cubes of stone and glass, each one placed with a precision that speaks of a craftsman's devotion. They are cool to the touch, a floor of frozen water that never warms, even in the height of the summer. The silence of the house is heavy and beautiful. It is the silence of security, of a world where walls are thick and the mountain on the horizon is merely a backdrop to a life of comfort and refinement. In this peristyle, the merchant and his family find their respite, a private universe where the chaos of the forum and the heat of the street cannot reach. You are sharing in this secret, a guest in a sanctuary of stone and leaf, listening to the whispers of the fountain and the soft, breathing presence of the garden. The sun continues its slow descent, and the shadows in the garden begin to stretch and shift, crawling across the grass like silent, dark fingers. But the peace of the peristyle remains unbroken. It is a time capsule of tranquility, a place where the noise of history is muted by the rustle of ivy and the steady liquid song of the marble basin. You are floating in a sea of green and gold, anchored by the ancient stones and lulled by the eternal greenery of the walls. The world is a garden, the afternoon is forever, and the city of Pompeii sleeps in the quiet embrace of its own private sanctuaries. The state of otium, that perfect and golden suspension of time, does not shatter with a sudden blow. Instead, it begins to fray at the edges, a slow and silent unraveling of the peace we found in the shaded peristyle. The garden remains as green as a polished emerald, and the frescoes still hold their eternal spring, yet something in the very soul of the silence has shifted. It is as if the air itself has grown heavy with a secret it is not yet ready to share, a weight that does not come from the heat of the sun, but from a deep and ancient pressure rising from the roots of the world. If you were to open your eyes now, leaning back against the cool stone of the column, you would find that the light has taken on a strange brassy quality, a hue that feels thick and unnatural, as if the sky were being viewed through a sheet of aged parchment. There is a subtle, almost imperceptible change in the way the air feels against your skin. The gentle draught that once carried the scent of rosemary and lavender has died away completely, leaving behind a stillness that is no longer comforting, but suffocating. It is a drop in pressure that you feel in the very marrow of your bones, a hollow sensation in the ears that makes the world seem distant and muffled. The atmosphere has become viscous, a stagnant sea that clings to the lungs and makes every breath feel like a conscious effort. You might find yourself swallowing against a phantom dryness, a thirst that the cool water of the fountain cannot quench, as the humidity of the afternoon is replaced by a parched electric tension. Listen to the silence of the garden. It is no longer the melodic peace of the morning. The industrious hum of the bumblebee has ceased, as if the insect has been grounded by an invisible weight. The birds that once darted through the laurel thickets and chattered in the eaves of the roof have vanished into the deeper shadows of the trees, their songs replaced by a heavy and expectant quiet. Even the cicadas, those tireless musicians of the midday heat, have fallen silent. This absence of sound is a physical presence, a ringing in the ears that demands your attention. It is the silence of a world holding its breath, a pause in the rhythm of life that feels like the moment before a great storm. Beside you, on the mosaic floor, the household dog has begun to move. He does not bark or growl, but there is a restless energy in his limbs that was not there before. He rises from his slumber not with a stretch and a yawn, but with a sudden, tense alertness. His ears are pricked, turning toward the earth rather than the street, and the hair along his spine has begun to rise in a jagged ridge of anxiety. He paces the length of the colonnade, his claws clicking with a sharp, frantic rhythm against the stones, a sound that cuts through the stillness like a needle. He stops, sniffs the air with a wide-eyed intensity, and then emits a low, mournful whine that seems to vibrate in the very back of his throat. It is a sound of pure, instinctive dread, a warning from a creature that can feel the tremors of the earth long before they reach the human heart. Look toward the small silver bowl that sits upon a bronze tripod near the fountain. It is filled with clear, still water intended for a quick ritual or a cooling rinse of the hands. For hours, its surface has been as flat and reflective as a mirror. But now, a tiny change has occurred. A series of concentric ripples as fine as a spider's silk has begun to travel from the center of the bowl toward its rim. There is no wind to cause them, no insect has landed upon the surface, and yet the water is trembling. It is a rhythmic and persistent shudder, a visible echo of a vibration that is traveling through the deep basalt foundations of the house. If you were to place your fingertips against the metal of the tripod, you would feel it too, a subsonic hum, a thrumming that is less a sound and more a feeling of the stone no longer being immovable. The mountain, our green and silent guardian, remains on the horizon, but its character has altered in this strange brassy light. It no longer looks like a monument of peace. The forests on its slope seem darker, more brooding, and the air around its twin peaks is shimmering with a heat that has nothing to do with the sun. There is a sense of immense coiled power beneath that verdant skin, a giant beginning to stir after 1,000 years of sleep. You can almost hear it if you listen with your soul, a low, grinding sound of rock against rock, a deep and guttural groan from the belly of the world. It is the whisper of the earth, a message carried through the soil and the stone, telling of a fire that has found its way back to the surface. In the kitchen of the villa, the terracotta jars have begun to rattle ever so slightly against one another on their wooden shelves. It is a dry, hollow sound, a clink-clink that repeats with a maddening regularity. The slaves who move through the house have stopped their work, their faces pale and drawn as they look at one another in the gathering gloom. They do not speak, for there are no words for this feeling, this sudden realization that the ground beneath their feet is no longer a certainty. The very walls of the domus, thick and ancient, seem to be sighing, the mortar groaning under a pressure that is invisible yet absolute. Return your gaze to the Peristyle garden. The lizard that was basking on the warm stone has vanished into a crack in the masonry, and the ivy on the columns is perfectly still, yet the leaves seem to be shivering. The scent of the garden has changed as well. The sweet perfume of lavender and rosemary has been overtaken by a faint, acrid smell, a hint of sulphur and burnt stone that seems to be rising from the very cracks in the pavement. It is a sharp, metallic fragrance that stings the nostrils and leaves a bitter taste upon the tongue. It is the smell of the deep places, the breath of the underworld escaping through the pores of the city. The water in the fountain basin is no longer clear. A fine grey silt has begun to rise from the bottom, clouding the liquid until it looks like liquid lead. The steady plink-plink of the falling jet has become erratic, the flow of the water stuttering as if the pipes themselves are being squeezed by a giant hand. The rhythm of the house, which has been constant for generations, is breaking apart. You are witnessing the end of a long and beautiful dream, the moment where the luxury of the Roman world meets the primordial fury of the earth. The pressure in the air is now so great that it feels like a physical hand pressing against your chest. Your heart beats with a frantic, uneven rhythm, mirroring the tremors in the silver bowl. The shadows in the colonnade have deepened, turning a bruised, purplish hue, while the light in the center of the garden has become a harsh and sickly yellow. There is no escape from this sensation. It is everywhere, in the stone, in the water, and in the very breath you draw. The city of Pompeii is no longer a place of commerce and otium. It has become a fragile shell resting upon a waking titan. As you sit in the silence, the dog suddenly stops his pacing. He retreats to the furthest corner of the shade, curling into a tight, trembling ball, his eyes fixed upon the doorway. He is waiting for something, and as you watch the water in the bowl begin to slop over the rim, spilling in small, dark teardrops onto the mosaic floor, you realize that you are waiting too. The whispers of the earth are growing louder, transforming from a subtle vibration into a low, terrifying roar that exists just beyond the reach of human hearing. The peace of the garden is a ghost, a memory of a world that existed only minutes ago. The mountain is breathing, the earth is shifting, and the first act of the great transformation has begun. The silence is finally broken, not by a sound, but by a feeling of the world tilting, of the anchor being cut, and the city of Pompeii beginning its slow and inevitable slide into the embrace of history. The brassy, suffocating light of the afternoon does not merely fade, it is devoured. High above the twin peaks of the mountain, the sky has been torn asunder by a force that defies human comprehension. A colossal pillar of darkness has erupted into the heavens, a vertical ocean of ash and smoke that stretches so high it seems to pierce the very vault of the stars. It is a shape that many in the city recognize, yet in a form that is terrifyingly alien, the umbrella pine of the earth's own creation. A trunk of blackest soot rises for miles, straight and unyielding, before branching out into a vast, spreading canopy of grey and violet clouds that blot out the sun. The shadow it casts is not the kind shadow of a tree, but a cold and heavy shroud that brings an unnatural night to the middle of the day. If you were to look up from the sanctuary of the Peristyle, you would see the blue of the Mediterranean disappearing behind this encroaching wall of grit, replaced by a sky that looks like a bruised and festering wound. Then comes the sound. It is not a single explosion, but a continuous low-frequency roar that seems to emanate from every stone in the city. It is the sound of 1,000 furnaces being stoked at once, a deep and guttural thundering that vibrates through the soles of your feet and rattles the very teeth in your head. The air is no longer a gas. It has become a solid thing, thick with the weight of suspended minerals and the sharp, suffocating scent of burnt earth and sulphur. As you stand in the silence of the garden, the first herald of the mountain's fury arrives. It is a single tiny sound, a delicate tink against the terracotta tiles of the roof above. It is followed by another, and then another, a rhythmic and dry clicking that sounds like the approach of 1,000,000 invisible insects. This is the beginning of the grey snow. It does not fall with the grace of water, nor the silence of winter's frost. These are the lapilli, small pebbles of pumice, light as cork and sharp as glass, born from the cooling breath of the volcano's fire. They are ghostly and pale, a sickly white and grey that looks like frozen ash. As they begin to fall in earnest, the sound intensifies into a soft, persistent drumming, a sound like light hail hitting a parchment drum. You can see them now, dancing across the dark mosaic floor of the colonnade, bouncing with a frantic, chaotic energy before settling into the cracks between the stones. They are beautiful in a terrible way, porous and fragile, yet they carry with it the weight of an entire world being undone. Reach out your hand into the falling grit. The stones are warm to the touch, carrying the lingering heat of the mountain's heart. They feel strangely weightless in your palm, like bits of dried bone or hardened sea foam. If you were to crush one between your fingers, it would crumble into a fine, abrasive dust that smells of ancient fires and the deep, airless places of the world. The texture is gritty and sharp, a mineral kiss that leaves a pale residue upon your skin. This is the mountain itself, being torn apart and scattered to the winds, a rain of stone that is slowly, methodically erasing the vibrant colours of the city. The garden, our emerald sanctuary, is the first to be transformed. The deep velvet reds of the painted roses and the lush greens of the boxwood hedges are being covered by a fine, crystalline layer of grey. It is as if a filter is being placed over the world, draining the life from every leaf and petal. The lavender stems bow under the gathering weight of the stones, their purple blossoms disappearing beneath a shroud of volcanic debris. The water in the fountain, which was already clouded with silt, is now being pelted by the falling lapilli, each stone creating a tiny hollow plop before sinking to the bottom. The rhythmic music of the water is being drowned out by the dry, relentless hiss of the falling snow. A heavy and absolute silence is beginning to descend upon the city, but it is a silence born of terror rather than peace. The streets, which only hours ago were filled with the hubbub of commerce and the music of the aqueduct, have fallen into a state of shocked stillness. You can hear the distant, muffled sound of heavy doors being bolted and wooden shutters being slammed shut against the falling rain of stone. The voices of the people have changed. They are no longer the confident murmurs of a city that believes in its own eternity. They are hushed, frantic whispers, the sounds of families gathering in the dark, lighting their oil lamps against a night that was not supposed to arrive. The air is becoming a landscape of textures. You can feel the fine ash beginning to settle in your hair and on your clothing, a dry and heavy powder that makes every movement feel sluggish. It clogs the throat and stings the eyes, a persistent and invisible grit that tastes of metal and stone. If you were to speak, your voice would feel thick and distorted, the sound absorbed by the growing layer of pumice that is already muffling the echoes of the house. The world is becoming a time capsule in real time, every object being wrapped in a protective, suffocating layer of grey. Observe the way the light is changing. The sun is now a pale, indistinct disk, a ghost of a star struggling to shine through the thickening canopy of the ash cloud. It casts a sickly monochromatic glow over the peristyle, turning the marble columns into pillars of ash and the statues into pale mourning spirits. The shadows have lost their sharp edges. They are now blurry and soft, merging with the falling stones until the entire world feels like a charcoal drawing that is being slowly smeared by a giant hand. It is a visual dissolution, a slow fading of reality into a dreamscape of grey and shadow. As the snow continues to fall, the sound on the roof changes. The light clicking has become a heavy, rhythmic thudding. The weight of the pumice is beginning to tell, pressing down upon the wooden beams and the terracotta tiles with a steady, mounting pressure. You can hear the wood groaning in protest, a long and low creak that speaks of structural limits being tested. It is a sound of tension, of a city that was built for the sun and the rain, now struggling to carry the burden of the earth's own fire. Every few minutes, a larger stone, a bomb of volcanic rock, hits the street outside with a sound like a hammer hitting an anvil, a sharp and violent reminder of the power that has been unleashed. The birds have long since vanished, and the household pets have retreated to the deepest, darkest corners of the rooms. The silence of the animals is perhaps the most terrifying sound of all. It is a complete surrender to the elements, a recognition that the rules of the natural world have been suspended. In the garden, the only movement is the falling of the stones and the slow, heavy swaying of the trees under their growing burden. The world has become a monochromatic theatre, and the grey snow is the final curtain beginning to fall. As you sit in the gathering gloom, you can feel the isolation beginning to take hold. The walls of the house, which once felt like a symbol of security, now feel like the walls of a tomb. The grey snow is piling up against the thresholds, a silent and rising tide that is sealing the city away from the rest of the world. It is a muffling of the soul, a slow and hypnotic drowning in a sea of mineral dust. The mountain is no longer whispering. It is singing a low and mournful dirge, a song of ash and stone that will last for 1,000 years. The first flakes of the grey snow were a curiosity, a strange and fleeting event in a long afternoon. But now, as the layer on the ground grows thick enough to bury your sandals, the reality of the great muffling begins to sink in. This is not a passing storm. This is the beginning of an eternal sleep. The city of Pompeii is being tucked in under a blanket of matter, a heavy and silent covering that will preserve its secrets until the world is ready to hear them once more. The sky is gone, the sun is a memory, and the grey snow continues to fall, a relentless and rhythmic heartbeat in the centre of the dark. The world as you once knew it, a place of vibrant colours and sharp, clear echoes, has been swallowed by a silent and all-consuming sea of grey. The air is no longer a transparent medium for light and sound. It has become a thick, suspended soup of mineral dust and fine glass-like particles that cling to the very fabric of your soul. If you were to stand in the centre of the Peristyle now, you would find that the boundaries of your universe have shrunk to the reach of your own outstretched fingertips. The sky is gone, replaced by a ceiling of impenetrable soot that has brought a heavy and absolute midnight to the middle of the afternoon. It is a darkness that does not merely sit upon the world, but seems to emanate from the ground itself. A shadow so dense it feels as though it has a physical weight, pressing against your skin with a cool and suffocating persistence. Listen to the change in the air. The great muffling has begun. The sharp, rhythmic plink of the fountain has been extinguished, not because the water has stopped flowing, but because the sound has been devoured by the rising tide of ash. If you were to shout, your voice would not travel to the far wall of the garden. It would fall dead at your feet, absorbed by the millions of tiny porous chambers of the pumice stones. Every surface is now covered in a layer of volcanic velvet, a thick and powdery shroud that eats every vibration, every echo, every whisper. The world has been wrapped in a blanket of silence so profound that you can hear the rush of your own blood in your ears, a steady and frantic drumming that is the only rhythm left in a world that has stopped breathing. It is a silence that feels like the inside of a tomb, a peace that is both terrifying and strangely, beautifully absolute. The isolation is now total. You are no longer part of a city of 20,000 souls. You are a solitary ghost inhabiting a stone island in an ocean of ash. You know that your neighbours are only a few feet away, behind the walls of their own houses, yet they might as well be on the far side of the moon. No sound passes between the buildings. The frantic cries for help, the slamming of doors, the groaning of timber, all of it is silenced by the growing weight of the mountain's gift. You are left alone with the sounds of your own body, the dry scratch of your breath in a throat caked with dust, and the soft, rhythmic hiss of the fine ash sliding through the cracks in the roof tiles. It is a moment of pure, unadulterated solitude, a state where the only reality is the stone beneath you and the darkness around you. In this unnatural night, the ritual of the oil lamp becomes a sacred act of defiance. You reach for the small terracotta vessel that sits upon the marble table, its surface now hidden under a finger's depth of grey silt. Your fingers find the familiar curves of the clay, a texture that is rough and earthy yet comforting in its domesticity. You can feel the oily residue on its rim, a smell of pressed olives that carries with it the memory of sun-drenched groves and peaceful harvests. As you strike the flint, the spark is a brilliant and shocking intrusion into the gloom, a tiny star born from the friction of stone. When the wick finally catches, the flame is small and hesitant, a golden teardrop that trembles in the heavy air. Observe the quality of the light. It is an amber, flickering glow that does not pierce the darkness so much as it creates a small, fragile bubble of visibility around you. The shadows it casts on the walls are long and distorted, dancing across the frescoes like the spirits of the ancestors. In this dim radiance, the painted roses on the wall seem to glow with a deep and bruised purple, and the figures of the gods look down with eyes that seem to blink in the shifting light. The smell of the burning oil is thick and sweet, a warm and resinous fragrance that provides a momentary shield against the acrid metallic scent of the sulphur and the burnt mountain. It is the scent of a human home, a fragile and beautiful smell of life persisting in the heart of the great destruction. The ash is not content to stay outside the walls. It is a persistent and fluid thing, finding its way through the smallest gaps in the masonry, through the spaces around the heavy wooden doors, and through the latticework of the high windows. It falls in silent, graceful streams, like sand in an hourglass that measures the end of time. You can see it in the light of your lamp, a fine and glittering rain that settles upon every surface, turning the dark wood of the furniture and the vibrant colours of the rugs into a uniform and ghostly grey. If you were to run your hand over the table, your fingers would leave a dark trail in the powder, a temporary signature on a world that is being erased. The texture is impossibly fine, a soft and abrasive silt that feels like the touch of a dry, ancient hand. The house itself is no longer silent. Under the mounting weight of the pumice, which is now several feet deep upon the flat roofs, the great wooden beams of the ceiling are beginning to sing a slow and mournful song of stress. It is a sound of long, low creaks and sharp, sudden snaps, as the oak and pine struggle to carry a burden they were never designed to bear. Each sound is muffled by the ash, appearing as a dull and distant vibration rather than a sharp noise, adding to the sense of being inside a great living creature that is slowly being crushed. You can feel the tension in the walls, a pressure that seems to be closing in from all sides, turning the spacious domus into a narrow and intimate cage. There is a strange and heavy peace in this state of being buried. The fear that was so sharp in the first hours of the eruption has begun to dull, replaced by a surreal and hypnotic resignation. The struggle against the elements has become impossible, and in that impossibility there is a kind of rest. You sit by your small lamp, watching the flame dance, and the world outside the room ceases to matter. The great empire, the politics of the forum, the debts and the triumphs of the morning, they have all been extinguished by the grey snow. There is only the light, the smell of the oil, and the soft, rhythmic fall of the ash. You are being preserved layer by layer in a cocoon of mineral dust, a time capsule of a single moment that will last for 2,000 years. Your breathing has slowed, matching the languid rhythm of the falling grit. The air is warm and heavy, saturated with the fine powder that makes every inhale feel thick and substantial. You might find yourself drifting into a state of waking dream, where the shadows on the wall become more real than the stone of the house. In this dream, the mountain is not an enemy, but a blanket, a heavy and silent covering that is putting the city to sleep. The great muffling is not just a physical phenomenon, it is a state of the soul, a turning inward away from the chaos of the world toward the deep and quiet center of the self. The silence outside has become so absolute that it feels as if the rest of the world has simply vanished. There are no more sounds of falling stones, no more cries of the wind, no more thundering from the mountain peaks. There is only the heavy velvet dark and the steady, silent accumulation of the ash. The city of Pompeii has become a secret, hidden away from the sun and the sea, wrapped in a shroud of stone that will keep its heart beating in the silence until the light of a distant future finds it once again. You are the keeper of that secret, a silent witness to the great darkening, sitting in the golden glow of your lamp as the world is tucked in for its long and eternal sleep. As the lamp begins to flicker, its oil running low, the shadows grow taller and the darkness presses in even closer. The grey snow continues its silent work, sealing the doors and windows, muffling the heart of the house until the only sound left is the tiny, rhythmic pop of the cooling wick. The great muffling is complete. The city is gone. The house is a sanctuary, and you are alone in the beautiful, terrifying, and absolute peace of the dark. The heartbeat of the city, which only a day ago was a vibrant and rhythmic pulse of water, commerce, and human breath, has finally ceased. Pompeii does not merely rest, it has been submerged beneath a sea of matter, so vast and so heavy that time itself has been forced to stop at the threshold. If you were to look out across the landscape where the bay once met the bustling port, you would see nothing but a smooth and undulating desert of grey. The streets, the fountains, the gardens, and the grand arches of the Forum have all been erased from the surface of the earth. Only the very tips of the tallest temple columns peek through the ash, like the fingers of a drowning giant reaching for a sky that no longer recognizes the land. It is a world of monochromatic stillness, a landscape where the wind can find no resonance and the sun can find no reflection. The city has been tucked in under a blanket of stone, a covering so thick and so absolute that the heat of the eruption has been replaced by a deep, subterranean chill. Listen to the silence that now reigns over the buried world. It is not the quiet of a room at night, nor the peace of a garden at dawn. It is a heavy, pressurized silence, the sound of millions of tons of volcanic debris pressing down upon the remains of a civilization. It is a silence that has no edges, no echoes, and no end. If you could descend through the layers of pumice and fine ash back into the narrow alleys and the great houses, you would find an atmosphere that is perfectly sterile and still. The air is trapped, held in the tiny pores of the stone, carrying with it the last scents of the living city, a ghost of wood smoke, a hint of dried fish, the faint and metallic tang of the sulphur that brought the final sleep. It is the breath of a world held in a state of perpetual hesitation, a lungful of air that will not be exhaled for nearly 2,000 years. We move through the darkness of the buried streets, our footsteps producing no sound upon the soft grey carpet that fills the voids. We find ourselves in a small bakery, one of the many that fed the city with the golden bread we smelled in the morning. Here, the final moments of a routine are frozen in a terrifying and beautiful stasis. Inside the great brick oven, 81 loaves of bread remain. They are no longer the soft, fragrant things of the dawn. They have been carbonized by the heat and the weight, transformed into dark, stony artifacts that hold the shape of the baker's hands. If you were to touch one, it would feel like a cold and ancient relic, a piece of charcoal that carries the memory of a hearth that will never be lit again. The smell here is of burnt flour and cold ash, a dry and dusty aroma that speaks of a labour interrupted and a hunger that was never satisfied. In the house of Orpheus, the domesticity of the morning has been turned into a monument of stillness. In the atrium, the dog that paced the colonnade with such restless anxiety has finally found his peace. He is curled into a tight circle, his head tucked against his paws, his body covered by a fine and delicate layer of the grey snow. He looks as though he is merely dreaming, waiting for the sound of his master's voice to wake him for the evening meal. But there is no movement in his limbs, and the chain that binds him to the floor is now a frozen line of rust and ash. The texture of his fur is lost beneath the mineral shroud, and the air around him is so still that not a single hair moves in the darkness. It is a scene of heartbreaking loyalty and absolute rest, a tiny life captured in the middle of a single mournful breath. Across the city, in a grand dining room overlooking a buried garden, a table remains set for a feast that never began. The silver cups are still there, their surfaces tarnished by the volcanic gases, holding the dark and dried residue of honeyed wine. There are bowls of walnuts and figs, their skins shriveled and grey, looking like the fossilized remains of a distant world. The cushions on the couches still bear the indentations of bodies that once reclined there, the fabric now a fragile and papery web of carbonized threads. If you were to breathe upon them, they might dissolve into dust, yet in this airless tomb they hold their shape with a stubborn and ghostly persistence. The smell is of damp earth and old, cold stone, a scent that is both ancient and strangely fresh, as if the feast were interrupted only a moment ago. The frescoes in these buried rooms have been preserved in a darkness that knows no fading. Without the touch of the sun, the Pompeian red remains as deep and as vibrant as the day it was painted, a splash of blood-coloured brilliance in a world of grey. The painted gardens still bloom with their eternal roses, and the painted birds still hover over their painted fountains. But the moisture of the room is different now. It is the cold sweat of the earth, a fine dew that clings to the plaster and makes the colours look as though they are weeping. The texture of the walls is slick and cold, a skin of stone that protects the memories of the family from the crushing weight of the mountain. Above, the forum is a graveyard of architectural majesty. The great bronze statues, which once stood with such confidence in the light of the sun, are now buried up to their chests in the grit. They look like survivors of a great flood, their metallic limbs cold and green with a premature patina. The inscriptions that recorded the triumphs of emperors and the generosity of citizens are hidden, their letters filled with the grey silt, their messages of eternity silenced by the very earth they sought to dominate. The only sound here is the occasional, distant groan of the ash settling, a long and low vibration that travels through the layers of matter like a secret whispered in the dark. The mountain, the architect of this absolute sleep, stands guard over the silent city. It is no longer green. It is a jagged and broken monument of grey, its peak shattered and its slopes scarred by the paths of the fire. It has done its work. It has taken the vibrant, chaotic and beautiful life of Pompeii and wrapped it in a protective shroud of stone. It is a guardian of a different kind now, a sentinel over a treasure house of ghosts. The air around the summit is clear and cold, and the sun shines down upon the grey desert with a brilliant and indifferent light, unaware of the world that exists only a few feet beneath the surface. The silence of the buried city is a profound lesson in the fragility of the world. Every object, from the smallest bronze needle to the grandest marble temple, is now an equal in the darkness. The distinctions of wealth and status have been erased by the ash, leaving behind only the essential shapes of human existence. You can feel the weight of this history in the air, a pressure that is both physical and spiritual. It is the weight of 1,000 stories that were cut short, 1,000 voices that were silenced in the middle of a sentence. As you drift through this subterranean world, the sense of peace becomes overwhelming. There is no more fear, no more struggle, no more heat. There is only the cool, dark embrace of the earth. The city is sleeping a dreamless sleep, a rest that will last for centuries while the world above changes and forgets. The empires will rise and fall, the languages will shift, and the very shape of the coastline will alter. But here, in the heart of the stone, the year 79 will remain forever. The bread will stay in the oven, the dog will stay by the door, and the wine will stay in the cup. This is the great stillness, the final and absolute transformation of the stone city. It is a world where the clock has been broken and the sun has been extinguished, leaving behind a masterpiece of preservation and peace. The city of Pompeii is not dead, it is merely waiting, held in a state of grace by the very mountain that sought to destroy it. The silence is the music of the earth, a low and eternal hum that sings of the endurance of the soul and the beauty of the frozen moment. The city sleeps, the mountain watches, and the whispers of the past are held safe in the heart of the deep, dark grey. The silence that follows the great muffling is not a silence of hours or days, but a silence of centuries. Above the buried rooftops of Pompeii, the world continues its restless and noisy march. You can imagine the seasons turning in a slow and hypnotic cycle, the winters bringing cold rains that seep through the upper layers of ash, and the summers bringing a fierce heat that bakes the volcanic soil into a hard, protective crust. Empires crumble in the light of the sun. New languages are born and old ones are forgotten. The very shape of the coastline shifts as the sea retreats from the land it once embraced. Yet here, in the deep and velvet dark, nothing moves. The city is a secret held in the tight, unyielding fist of the earth. It is a time capsule of air and stone, a place where the scent of the last Roman afternoon is preserved in the tiny, airless voids between the grains of ash. If you were to listen with the ears of the earth, you would hear the steady, rhythmic heartbeat of time itself, a slow and heavy thrumming that marks the passage of 1,000 silent years. This is the architecture of the absence, a city built of shadow and hollow spaces. In the centuries of darkness, the organic things, the wooden doors, the wicker baskets, the linen curtains, and the very bodies of the people who sought sanctuary have slowly dissolved into the earth. They have left behind something more haunting than bone or timber. They have left behind their own shapes, carved into the hardened ash like a sculptor's mould. These are the ghosts of air, the empty spaces where life once pulsed. If you were to reach into one of these hollows, you would feel a cold and absolute void, a pocket of nothingness that holds the exact curve of a shoulder, the fold of a tunic, or the frantic grasp of a hand. It is a tactile memory of the final moment, a physical echo of a breath that was cut short. The smell here is of deep minerals and the weight of ages, a dry and ancient fragrance that has never known the touch of a breeze. Eventually, the silence is broken by a sound that does not belong to the mountain or the earth. It is a sharp, rhythmic clink of metal against stone, a sound that carries the energy of a new and curious world, A shovel bites into the volcanic crust. A pickaxe rings against a buried lintel. After 1700 years of absolute midnight, a single, slender shaft of light pierces the ceiling of a room. It is a shocking and brilliant intrusion, a needle of gold that cuts through the stagnant air and strikes the surface of a frescoed wall. In that moment, the Pompeian red wakes from its long slumber, glowing with a deep and bruised intensity, as if it were still wet from the artist's brush. The dust motes that have been still since the reign of Titus begin to dance in the light, their movements erratic and graceful, like tiny spirits celebrating the return of the sun. Step into this newly awakened room and feel the collision of the ages. The air you breathe is a mixture of the fresh, floral scent of the modern Italian afternoon and the stale, mineral breath of the ancient tomb. It is a heady and intoxicating aroma, a fragrance of discovery and resurrection. The textures here are a symphony of contrasts. The rough, abrasive grey of the volcanic ash meeting the smooth, cool marble of a floor that has not been walked upon since the world was young. You can run your hand along the wall and feel the fine, powdery residue of the centuries, a grit that tastes of sulphur and time. The city is no longer a graveyard. It is a laboratory of memory, a place where the echoes of the past are being carefully and methodically gathered. Listen to the echoes that fill these empty spaces. They are not sounds, but feelings that resonate in the marrow of your bones. In the silent forum, where the statues have been reclaimed from the grit, you can almost hear the low, rhythmic hum of 1,000 ghostly conversations. It is a vibration of commerce and law, a murmuring that rises from the worn paving stones like heat from a summer road. In the bakeries, the carbonized loaves of bread speak of a morning that never ended, their stony surfaces holding the imprint of a labor that was meant to nourish a family long since gone. In the theaters, the wind whistles through the stone tiers with a sound like distant applause, a hollow and haunting melody that speaks of comedies and tragedies that were performed under a different sky. The city has become an eternal time capsule, a masterpiece of preservation that mocks the fleeting nature of human life. Every object that is pulled from the ash carries with it the weight of a specific, frozen second. A bronze needle, a silver mirror, a child's marble, a doctor's scalpel. These are the tiny, intimate anchors that ground the grand tragedy in the reality of the everyday. They are cold to the touch, yet they burn with the intensity of their history. As you look upon them, the distance between the year 79 and the present moment dissolves until it is nothing more than a thin and translucent veil. You are not looking at the past, you are standing within it, wrapped in the whispers of a world that refused to be forgotten. The mountain, our silent and broken guardian, continues to watch over the city it once buried. It is a constant presence on the horizon, its slopes now green again, with the vineyards of a new generation. But the mountain knows the secret of the fire that still sleeps within its heart. It knows that the peace of the bay and the beauty of the gardens are a fragile and temporary gift. The relationship between the stone city and the mountain is an eternal dance of creation and destruction, a cycle of fire and ash that defines the very essence of this land. The air around the peak is clear and still, yet there is a tension in the silence, a reminder that the earth is never truly at rest. As the sun begins to set over the modern Bay of Naples, the shadows in the excavated streets of Pompeii grow long and deep. The city prepares for its nightly return to the silence. The tourists depart, their voices and footsteps fading into the distance, leaving the stone walls to the company of the stars. The darkness that once filled these rooms for centuries returns, but it is no longer the heavy darkness of the burial. It is a soft and transparent gloom, a twilight where the ghosts of the past can walk with a little more freedom. You can feel the city settling into its own memory, the stone cooling and the air becoming still. The eternal echo of Pompeii is a song of endurance. It is a whisper that tells us that nothing is ever truly lost as long as there is a stone to hold the shape and a heart to hear the story. The city is a masterpiece of the frozen moment, a place where the ordinary has been made immortal by the extraordinary fury of the mountain. It is a sanctuary of otium and a monument to tragedy, a landscape of red paint and grey ash that will continue to haunt the imagination of the world for as long as the sun rises over the Mediterranean. Breathe in one last time the scent of the ancient stone and the evening air. Feel the smoothness of the marble beneath your hand and the weight of the history that surrounds you. The city is sleeping again, but its dreams are now shared by the world. The whispers of the fountain, the rustle of the painted ivy, the rhythmic thud of the distant oars, all of it is held safe in this time capsule of the soul. The day is done, the story is told, and the city of Pompeii fades into a soft and hypnotic twilight, a final, beautiful fade out into the embrace of eternity. The light is extinguished, the silence returns, and the echo remains, a steady and pulsing heartbeat in the center of the deep, dark grey. And so we gently close the heavy book. The dust of the ancient city settles once more, and the echoes of the past fade into the silence of the current. Library, the story is over. You can rest now. Everything is still. You are safe here, wrapped in the warmth of this room. The outside world cannot touch you. There is only this moment of peace. If you wish to return to these quiet shelves tomorrow night, please stay with us in the library by subscribing. Your chair by the fire will always be waiting for you. Now, Let your thoughts drift away. Sleep, sleep deeply. Good night.